Hello, hello. Welcome to season 5 of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. My name is Debbie Heiser, and I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what's important to them. I see way too many business people letting their businesses or their jobs run their lives versus them figuring out with real clarity about what they want their lives to look like and having their job or their business be the conduit to have that life that they absolutely love. I want to thank you so much for listening in to season 5. This season is filled with motivation, inspiration, leadership, and wisdom from some super interesting guests, and myself included. My hope is through our shared experiences, you will see a bit of yourself and move further into leading your own lit up life. If you're enjoying this podcast, please feel free to share with others and leave a rating, and a comment or two would be awesome too. Let's get going. Thanks again for being a part of our community.
Straight from the corners of my mind is where I find my sanity.
Hello, and welcome to season 5 of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. I can't believe we've been doing this now for 4 seasons and heading into our 5th. And for those of you that have been listening, thank you so much for being a part of our team and our programs and what we do. And for those of you that haven't listened much, my name is Debbie Heiser, and I help entrepreneurs and business people. But I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love to do without sacrificing what's important to them. I see way too many people running a business and letting that business run their lives versus taking a look at it and saying, what do I want my life to be? And then using the business to be a conduit to that life. So today, I've been reflecting a lot towards the end of 2022, and as we move into 2023, and just over the last few years, everything that's occurred in our world, in the United States, in politics, just as people, as the human race, just all of these things. And so I've just been reflecting on this and really identifying too that, you know, the last episode was about finding your word, and I've been working on mine, and I have my words picked out, and really looking at this idea of being present. And sometimes that saying about being present is a little bit overused, but I want to explain what I feel like presencing is. And I teach this actually because I'm also an adjunct professor at Gonzaga. And I teach this theory U. Otto Scharmer from MIT is the one that really kind of produced this. And theory U talks about how if you imagine a U shape, and theory U talks about when you are heading down the U, something is dying to then allow something to be born. But in between this downward slope of something dying and something emerging from that is this bottom part of the U that's called presencing. And so thinking about being present, I was looking back at life, and it was interesting. This was a while ago. My sister Jenny and I were having some conversations around play and remembering as children what we did to play. And I remember living in Monticello, Iowa, and we would play tag, and it would be in the dark at night, and we'd be playing tag and all these things outside. But it took me a long time to remember those things. And part of that is just then also growing up. Part of it is, you know, putting those things to the side as things happened in life so that from a heart space that I was surviving. And I found more and more I was constantly looking towards the future. And that's part of what I do also, right? I help people look at what's on their heart, what they've been given as a desire, and looking at what the vision of that could be, and then stepping back and saying, all I need to know is the first step, right? But a lot of times what happened was in my past, and even sometimes in my current reality, there's a lot of things that happen that are really subtle that potentially I don't realize until a little bit after the fact that I'm doing to kind of hide a little bit. And that hiding comes in the way of being super busy. Now, I lead a very full life. I'm the first one to admit it. I don't feel busy very often. There's a couple of times that maybe I have something going on every night during the week, and I have early mornings that feels busy. But overall, 95% of the time, I don't feel busy. It's full. I have a lot of things on my plate and I do a lot of things, but I have to be careful of that because I can stretch over into the busy of then avoiding the reflection and avoiding being present and feeling the feelings sometimes. The other thing that I've found to be subtle for me, and it's interesting because I have this beautiful digital camera. I used to do film, and I used to stand on the sidelines of my son's football games and take photos. Of course, he used to roll his eyes, but it was funny. All the boys loved the photos and I would print a bunch off. They put them on their Facebook pages, all of this kind of stuff. But anyway, I digress a little bit. But I found like my nickname was Debarazzi because I would take so many photos and I always had my camera hanging around my neck. And part of that was because I could be a part of whatever was occurring, but I wasn't present in the moment because I was constantly thinking about, oh, what would make a good photo here? Oh, let me take the picture. And I would hide behind the camera. Now, I didn't realize it was hiding at the time. And if you take photos, please, I'm not saying that you're hiding, but the amount of photos, the way I used the camera to not show up 100% was what I had to start looking at. So that got me to thinking too about, okay, so when we're present, we feel it, we sense it, our intuition, it's like embodiment, right? Our mind is thinking about it, our heart is feeling it, our body feels things, our spirit or our intuition knows. It has a knowing about it. And so as I was thinking about that, to me, the sweet spot is this presencing. And going back to the you of something dying and something emerging, I started to think about this push and pull. And I was thinking about too, the fact that, and I heard this somewhere, I don't remember where. So if you're listening and you said this and I didn't give you credit, I apologize. But a speaker, I think one time that I was listening to talked about how the pull, well, they didn't talk about the pull. Let me back up. They talked about the difference. Inspiration is internal. It's that what inspires us to move forward. A push is sometimes motivation, and motivation is external, where we look externally for people to motivate us or for certain things to motivate us. You know, like I remember where in order to lose weight, I would pick something like a class reunion or a wedding, and I would work really hard. And it was all about the event versus my health, what actually needed to take place, which is a whole nother podcast. But when I thought about that, the motivation is the push. What happens is I think about a string. And I think about the string kind of being connected to our heart space. And this string is what pulls us forward. That's the pull. And it's about pulling, leaning into what's emerging, right? So this law of gestation talks about that there's a gestation period for everything. Sometimes we have to have a little bit of patience. Sometimes, excuse me, we can hide behind being like this law of gestation because we're afraid. So we can say, oh, we're gestating on it, or we're being patient and letting something emerge, when in fact we're just hiding behind it. So there's a fine line there. But the point being is that this law of gestation says, like, leaning into something is about opening yourself up to receive, right? Like opening yourself to creativity and to what's emerging. And that's that pull. So I think about that again as a string. I think about the push or that motivation is then sometimes where we need a little help, right? We're humans and we were designed to be in community. So sometimes we need community and a little bit of help and a little push or a little motivation to do something. Now, what I see happen is the sweet spot of presencing is between the leaning in, the pull and the push. And this flow that kind of goes back and forth. And the reason I use flow and kind of like a flowing movement is that it's not a start, stop, jerky piece. But a lot of times what ends up happening is we're jerking back and forth because we're jumping into something, or we're pushing way too hard. And I think about, if you've never seen this happen, look it up on YouTube or Google it, where a guitar string breaks. And a guitar string, when it breaks, it coils and crinkles in, and basically it constricts. So it's almost as if when we push too hard, the string crinkles and gets very constrictive. The flow between allowing the pull and allowing the push creates this sweet spot of presencing, being able to be embodied and listen deeply, not just with your ears, but with your intuition and that deep knowing that you have. Now, part of what happens here is I have clients every day that walk into my office or that are on Zoom that they don't trust themselves. So they've learned not to trust themselves. So therefore the pull doesn't feel culturally right. What feels culturally right is to push, push, push. We're just going to go do it and work harder and do this thing. And so we're constantly pushing to the point where people get burned out, they get worn out. And it's not about that. It's about allowing yourself sometimes to slow down in order to speed up. So that deep listening and trusting your intuition. And here's the deal, the universe is ordered. If you look at nature, there is an order to nature. When you think about your life, and I'm not talking like a religious thing like predestination, what I'm talking about is the fact that there is a knowing, there is a path that is the best path for us. And we have to trust. Now, for those of us that have a faith base, that might be what we call the Holy Spirit. Some of you might call it universe, whatever works for you. Please don't get caught in the vernacular of the religion speak. But what I'm talking about is your spirit, your intuition, and trusting that. Because when you think about that, the universe is ordered. Whenever there's confusion, that means there's a lie going into our subconscious, which we've just received a message in our subconscious brain that would create a belief that then makes something right or wrong. So ultimately, when you think about looking at this fact that you're being pulled forward or pushed, and allowing for that presencing, allowing for that spaciousness to be able to do that, you have to be able to slow down a little bit. You have to then take a look at where you have learned to not trust yourself. A perfect example, and I did it to my son, and my mom and dad did it to me, where you would, as a child, be asked, where would you like to go eat? And you would say McDonald's or Applebee's, and your parents would say, are you sure that's really where you want to go? Or you're sure that's what you want to order on the menu? Now, granted, sometimes you'd order something and it was terrible, and so your parents were trying to help you. They're just trying to keep you safe. But what that does is then say to your subconscious to not trust yourself. We do that as leaders. We come in and we think we're helping our employees because we'll come in and do something because they're struggling or take over something, all with the intention that we're helping them, when in fact, we're saying to them, we don't trust that they can do it. So there's all these messages that are coming at us not to trust ourselves, which therefore then makes it hard sometimes to sit in the moment, to be present, to take a few moments. I take nature walks regularly and go out in nature and just try to listen to nature and what it might be telling me. I try really hard to do a body scan and listen to my body and say, the issues are in the tissues. And I'm a huge Louise Hay's fan, that like things that happen in our bodies are related to emotion. And so it's just important to kind of be aware of these things so that you can get into this, like the pull and the push, the pull and the push, so that then you have this sweet spot where you're not constricting, you're opening up to receive, and therefore bringing joy into your life, being able to lead the life that you want to lead. And it doesn't mean that everything's all unicorn and roses. Life is hard. I've had plenty of hardships, but it helps with that internal messaging that you have, because part of it is too, this whole idea of being present is also making sure that we're not beating ourselves up all the time. When I hear somebody say I'm my own worst critic, there's a critic inside your head that constantly then is reinforcing these messages that we've received not to trust ourselves. So that's a whole nother podcast. But I wanted to start this year out with this idea of being open to leaning into something and then having a little bit of a push and having that sweet spot where you're present. One of the things that was really interesting, I walked in the other day somewhere and there was this group of 6 people sitting, and every single person was on their phone, not having a conversation. Now, I'm not against cell phones. I love my cell phone. I use it for business and everything else. But sometimes it's a matter of setting it down and being intentional about it, because we've created habits for ourselves, right? And so I just would ask you to think about, as you go forward in this year, think about ways that maybe you're not showing up as your best self because you're not showing up fully present. Or part of it is, for me, is like I'm constantly thinking about what's coming next. So sometimes I'm not listening to conversations I'm having with people. And so just give some thought to that, not to beat yourself up, but to be able to change it, to be able to look at how can I do that differently in 2023. So I'll leave you with that part of it. And then I'm still bouncing around with my word. I'm taping this on the 28th of December, and you'll hear it in a few days, but I'm still kind of wrestling a little bit, but I will share with you part of what I'm looking at is this idea of rest. And I don't mean all the self-care of massages and all that. I think that's great. And I do some of those things to take care of myself from a health perspective, but also this idea of rest, meaning slowing down and making sure that I am doing the nature walks that I have planned. And so this rest and releasing. So like making sure I'm releasing things that aren't serving me, the law of sacrifice, like, and I don't mean serving me in an ego way, but like, am I serving other people? Or am I doing all of these other things and not able to do some of what I want to do when it comes to this? So, and releasing things that I don't need to carry anymore. Sometimes that's heavy. The other piece of it, so rest, release, revive, and receive as kind of the 4 words that I'm looking at together, like reviving myself, right? Like in this rest and in this releasing of something, like reviving it, and then being open to receiving it and being present so that I don't miss when I'm given a gift. So with that, I hope you've had a wonderful new year, and we will talk to you next week. That's it for now. And if you would love to talk to me, because I know I would love to talk to you, please go out to my website. You can find it in the show notes and set up a free 30-minute clarity call. I promise you'll be clearer after you leave that call than when you got on the phone. And I'd love to talk to you. So with that, I hope everybody had a happy new year, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks so much for listening. The song Right is co-written and sung by Miss Jackie Wilson and her collaborators Tyler Banks, David DJ Lee, and Chris Renee. And a huge shout out to them for allowing us to use this perfect song. Everyone have a fabulous week, and I'll talk to you next week.